my granny.
This is my grandmother.
And this is my grandma.
Seniors are very important.
I love you, Babcha. We need you.
You are loved.
When the sun is bright or in the darkest night, we're all in this together. I've got many friends, and you are one of them. We're all in this together. It will be okay. Ça va bien aller.
Ça va bien aller.
I've got many songs to sing, won't you? Sing them too, sing them too.
Hi, my name is Richard King. I'm a mystery writer. Welcome to this episode of Author Conversations. I'm currently a mystery writer, but I didn't start out life as a writer. I started out and this is my earliest memory of reading, wanting to be a writer. And I wanted to be a mystery book writer. I started reading the Hardy Boys when I was very young. And there was something about the way in which mysteries are set up, in that something awful happens, there's work on the chaos, trying to sort it out, and then it comes to a rational conclusion. That's not true in life, but it is true in the genre of mystery writing, and I found that very attractive for many reasons. One of which, and I think this is key to why I like mysteries, is when I was very young, on my 7th birthday in fact, my mother died. She was 32 years old. When this happens to a 7-year-old, their rational world falls apart, and it is nothing but chaos. All children have the belief that their parents will live forever and be there forever. Looking at it from the perspective of a 7-year-old, it's not till you're really in your 20s and even beyond that you realize that your parents won't be there forever. But you never, ever, ever get rid of that little teeny feeling inside you that they will be there, that childish feeling that comes from being a child in a family, that your parents will be there forever. I've been to funerals of my friends' parents and my own father, and I think that's the final realization that someone who has meant so much to you over such a long period of time will not be there forever. So when that relationship is cut short from a 7-year-old perspective without reason, the world stops making sense. If that could happen, if something so fundamental as the loss of a parent that should be there forever can happen, what else can happen? It's secondary. So if that terrible, terrible thing can happen, anything can happen. And it's very difficult to adjust to the knowledge that the world is chaotic at that young an age. So of course you're going to seek some kind of rational explanation. Now let's fast forward to when I went to university. My field of study was history. And it's not that much different in terms of all kinds of chaotic things happen in history, but the historian's job is to provide a rational explanation for the events as they occurred. And again, that's what attracted me to history. I knew from probably the time I was in my early teens that I wanted to be a writer, that I wanted to write mystery stories. The only problem there was I had no clue how to go about it, other than, of course, to get paper and a pen and write something. But I knew nothing about the book business. I knew nothing about how to get published. I didn't hang out with other people who wanted to be writers. So it kind of became a secret ambition. Over time, I went into the book business after not being able to find a job in the history business. Loved the book business. As I got more and more knowledgeable about how the book business worked, I became more and more confident about wanting to actually participate in it on not only the bookseller level, but on the writing level. When my son was about 14 years old, he wasn't doing his homework. This is not unusual for 14-year-olds, but his mother and I decided that we would turn the TV off, and that would kind of force him to do his homework, because the TV wasn't going to go on again until he finished his homework. I couldn't turn the TV on to watch what I wanted to watch when my son was doing his homework. That would just be beyond cruel. So I said, well, now that I have this time on my hands, I'm going to write a mystery. And that's kind of where it started. And I wrote my first mystery, remembering the words of advice from my 5th grade teacher, Sarah Paul-Teal. Write what you know. So the first 2 principal characters in my first book were Sam Wiseman, a bookseller who owned a bookstore in downtown Montreal called Dickens and Company, and a cop, Gaston Lemieux. And there's a murder on McGill campus. Sam happened to be in the professor's office, or going to the professor's office after the murder occurred, so he's kind of a suspect. He's able to prove that he didn't kill this history professor, another element of Write What You Know, and sort of the story unfolds from there. And I wrote, in the end, 3 mysteries with those principal characters, and that, in a nutshell, is kind of, in broad strokes, my life as a mystery writer. In addition to writing mysteries, I started working with other people on their autobiographies. That is, people who, for some reason or another, didn't feel confident to tell their stories. They wanted professional help. The 2 I'm proudest of, one is called Wrestling with Life, and the other is called The Making of a Family. The first one is a book by George Reinitz. He was taken to Auschwitz as a 12-year-old and survived and had the most amazing life following his liberation. He came to Canada. He literally had nothing with him. It's not quite the case. He had a little box of his possessions from the orphanage he was at in Hungary, but when the ship pulled into Halifax Harbor, he chucked the box overboard, deciding to start his new life in his new country clean. The second book, The Making of a Family, is the story of Aviva Patak, who at about 1.5 years old was a hidden child. Her parents had the means to buy a farmer they knew a farm on condition that they hide their daughter Aviva in with their family. They knew the Nazis were about to invade, and they felt that was the best way to protect their child. And after the war, he did indeed live up to his end of the bargain and bring Aviva back to her hometown, only to find out that her parents had been murdered in the Kovno ghetto. And the rest of her story unfolds from that point. So I take a great deal of pride in working on these books because I think they're important historical records that we need in book form so that others can read these stories and be reminded of one of the worst events in human history. I don't remember having, a favorite stuffed animal that you went to sleep with. I always fell asleep with a book in my hand with my finger marking the place where I left off. Luckily, I have a fairly decent memory because when I woke up in the morning, my finger wasn't in that spot in the book, and the book was probably on the floor. So in a very real sense, since I didn't have a tattoo or didn't want one or whatever, the book served that role. And I've always liked the feel of paper books, and I think that's what attracted me to being a bookseller in the first place, was I just loved handling books, unboxing them, setting them up on display, handing them to customers, and so on. There's something about the feel of a book in paper that I find very pleasurable. I have 1,600 books in my condo, which can really not accommodate 1,600 books. So I'm at max. Not only was I a bookseller and the co-owner of Paragraph Bookstore, but I also do book reports on CBC. So my love of books, starting off as sort of providing me with comfort, turned into a pretty good career in the book industry. Mystery books are all written in series, as most people know. There's Sherlock Holmes and Nero Wolfe. Dashiell Hammett wrote a couple with the continuing character. So did Raymond Chandler. Agatha Christie, for sure, had all these continuing characters. That's the way mysteries are done. It's very rare that you get a one-off in the mystery writing business. There's usually two and often more because readers get attracted to the principal characters, their quirks, their personalities, and so on, and like to follow them through multiple books. So, as I said, the first set of books, the Bookshop Mysteries, had the same two continuing characters throughout. And the important thing to me as a writer is to like the characters I'm working with. And to me, they're very, very real people. And often the question in my mind is, well, what would Gilles do in this situation? What would Annie do in this situation? So they become kind of people in my mind that I communicate with, it sounds a little foolish, but that I converse with to see, which direction the plot is going to go. So that sort of is the overweening process of mystery writing, is finding really good characters that can move a story forward. Mostly, I make things up. The crimes that I conceive of don't actually happen. There are situations where I may steal an event from life and then reimagine it as part of a crime or something other than sort of its benign the benign event that it really is. I should point out at this juncture that all writers are thieves. When I'm in a cafe and when I'm alone, I'm eavesdropping on other people's conversations to see if there's anything that they say that I can use in a slightly different context. So you may want to be careful if you're in a cafe and you see a guy tapping away in a laptop computer. He may be a writer. he may be stealing something you're talking about. But by and large, and this is true of all mysteries, if all the characters in a mystery faced as many deaths as they face, we quickly depopulate Canada. So there's a little bit of art imitating life in the way I describe the cops, the way I describe the nurses, because those are real professions, but the underlying story is a product of my imagination. I think it was in 2008, I landed in the emergency room at the Jewish General Hospital with what was later diagnosed as atrial fibrillation. I was put on medication, and I was out the next day with a prescription to get the medication, and all was well. Atrial fibrillation sounds awful, but if you take the meds, it's really not all that serious. While I was in the hospital, because I wasn't feeling any symptoms, and sleeping in the emergency room in those days in a hospital was impossible, I had a chance to observe what was going on. And I noticed that when I came into the hospital at about 4:30, there was a volunteer who sort of ushered me through triage and, did the things that volunteers would do. But there was no volunteer in the evening. So I determined that once I was out and sort of got my life back on track and was on an even keel, I would volunteer to work in the emergency department in the evenings when my guess was they needed someone. And I think in April or May of 2009, I signed up and I started working as a volunteer in the emergency department. I noticed over time that when patients came in, the first person they saw was the triage nurse. And I noticed further that their ability to diagnose the illness was quite amazing. Their diagnosis goes into the patient's chart, and everything that happens flows from that original diagnosis. When the patient sees a doctor, obviously the diagnosis will be refined. More tests will add more information, and so on. But it's the brilliance of the triage nurses that sort of start the medical ball rolling. And it occurred to me that there was very little difference between that and what a detective, probably more a fictional detective, does to solve a crime. You look at the available evidence, based on your experience, you form a conclusion, and so on. So it was only a small leap from that to creating a new set of mysteries where the principal character is a nurse, Annie Linton, based on a real nurse in the emergency department, Maggie, and a cop, which is a totally fictional creation. They form a relationship when the cop, Gilles Berchasse, is shot. He's brought to the hospital, which I renamed the Gursky as an homage to Mordecai Richler. The driver slowed just enough to make a smooth turn into the ambulance bay. Annie Linton, the nurse on triage duty, and Athanasios Tom Andriadis, the senior orderly on duty, were waiting with a gurney. The driver got out and took 3 quick steps to the back of the ambulance. He yanked the back door open, pulled the gurney back from the back of the ambulance, and with the help of the second EMT, carefully brought the wheeled legs down. Nicole, this is Gilles Belchasse's partner, jumped out of the ambulance, ready to help if needed. Annie took command of the transfer and motioned for Tom to place the hospital gurney next to the one from the ambulance. Tom steadied the gurney and Annie called out, "On my count. 1, 2. She stopped when she noticed the pressure bandage had come loose and blood was spurting from his wound. "Gently," she called out. "Lower him gently." His bandage came off. The EMTs lowered Jill back onto the gurney, and one of them reached into the ambulance without taking his eyes off the patient. He felt around for pressure bandages, grabbed one, grabbed a couple, and tossed them to Annie. She caught them in her left hand, tossed all but one of them onto the still empty gurney, and tore open the one she held with her teeth. She applied it to the wound, and the bleeding stopped. Again she called out, "On my count. 1, 2, 3. The EMTs lifted Gilles' body and with Tom's help placed him on the gurney. Annie and Tom, with Nicole close behind, wheeled the gurney into the triage area. And the story sort of moves forward from there. The nurse, Annie Linton, meets Gilles Belchasse when she's triaging his gunshot wound and getting him into surgery. He comes back one day with flowers to thank her. He invites her out to dinner, and you can guess the rest. And together, they solve crimes. The thing about the books is the nurse always provides the insight that Gilles is missing in order to put all the evidence together. There are 2 books out now. One is called A Stab at Life. The other is called Banking on Life. And the 3rd book, Serving Life, will be out in April 2022. And I'm about halfway through the writing of the first draft of the 4th book in the series, which I've entitled A Will for Life. You can see the theme. I thought my earlier books had death somewhere in the title, so I was going to take a more positive approach this time and focus on life. There's 2 things about Maggie that are critically important to me. One, we're both members of a very exclusive club that no one wants to join. That is, we both lost a parent, our mothers, at a very young age. Maggie was a little older than me, but not significantly. Secondly, she has this amazing gift for compassion. I'm sitting next to the inspiration for the character in my 2 mysteries. Her real name is Margaret Quinsey. Everybody calls her Maggie. She's a new nurse in the emergency department of the Jewish General Hospital. In the books, I call her Annie Linton, and she's a triage nurse in the Gursky Memorial Hospital. To tell you what Maggie means to me will take a bit of time. But if I'd never written a word, if I'd never written a book, Maggie would be an inspiration because of her compassion for her patients and all those around her. It's impossible to describe how important that compassion is to a patient, especially a patient who is terrified of what a diagnosis might yield in terms of a disease. To be able to sit with someone like Maggie, even for the 10 minutes it might take her to do the regular workup, bloods and so on. I've seen the nervousness, the anxiety, the worry just wash out of the patient because of the way in which they interact with Maggie. Sometimes all it takes is a comforting touch to the patient's forearm. Sometimes she'll tell a little story or something from life. But whatever magic she works, it goes a long way to curing the patient from whatever ails them. So that's why she inspired me to write the books, and that's why she's a constant source of inspiration for me.
First of all, you give me way too much credit. But thank you. He's a very special person to me. I love him with all my heart. But how we actually united was the fact that one day I had posted a message about my mother's, it was her...
The anniversary
of her death, exactly. So he had realized, because I lost my mom when I was 10 years old. And when I met Richard, and I have that in common, he also lost his mom at a very young age. So that kind of grew it bonded us, I guess I should say. And from that moment on, we kind of just hit it off and became very close friends. He's a dear, dear person to me who's actually inspires me, I think, more than I inspire him. But I'm just not a writer. I can't write in a book.
Well, we can discuss that endlessly. We'll just have to resolve that it's mutual inspiration.
Yes.
She's the kind of person that you don't have to come to the hospital to see her. If she sees you on the street and she thinks something is wrong, she'll stop for a minute and try and set things right, which is a wonderful characteristic to have. I know very, very, very few people who possess that kind of characteristic. One of the reasons I chose Maggie as the inspiration, or maybe she chose me, is because I was sick to death of mysteries that were really very dark, that started off with multiple murders, with cops and their cohorts who are in some way lacking in certain positive personality conflicts. And I wanted to write, even though the mystery involves a murder, which is not a good thing, I wanted my characters to be more hopeful, more positive, and they are. There are people who don't really like that in a mystery, but frankly, I don't care. They're my mysteries. I'm writing them the way I want to write them, and those are the kind of characters I want to populate my imaginary world.
I guess the thing that touched me the most about the book, I mean, it's a great read. It's interesting, it's fun, it's easy. So I really enjoyed that part. But the part that touched me the most was his acknowledgement in both books, actually. I can't read it even today without having tears in my eyes, because not only does he honor my mother in the first book, but he says some really kind and sweet and loving words that expresses, I know, how he feels. And to have that written for other people to see and share with strangers, I guess it is. It's how words just, like, his words just meant so much to me and touched me so deeply and got to the core of who I am, I think, as a person also. So I'm an emotional person. It's just a part of me, and that's probably what I would hope makes me the nurse that I am, is my compassion and my the highly emotional side of me that I hope I never lose. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, being triaged when you're worried about being sick is a very emotional time for the patient, and they connect with that interplay of emotions. They don't want to be diagnosed by a robot. They want some emotional feedback that acknowledges what they're going through.
When somebody is going through the worst moment of their life, I want to be able to just
That's okay.
to give them that compassion that they need. And the funny thing is, with this COVID and seniors, and we haven't been able to do that. And COVID has stole that from us, that we can't have the same compassion, and we can't touch people the way I need to do, because I'm a huggy, touchy-feely person, and we haven't been able to do that. And that's really been the worst part of this whole COVID. And as a nurse, it stole a lot of our I can't think of the word.
Well, a lot of your compassionate connection with
Exactly.
your patients.
The connection, exactly. Because everything is in and out now. You can't touch. You have to be fully gowned and gloved, and not being able to just hold somebody's hand when they're sick and scared has been a really, really detrimental to my profession and to the patients, most importantly.
My feeling as a former volunteer and, of course, an amateur is that nurses are critical to the healthcare system. You can operate a hospital without doctors, I'm sure. You cannot operate a hospital for more than a second, and that second would be to evacuate all the patients without nurses. They are the cotter pin of our healthcare system. Keeping them should be a governmental priority. Paying them whatever you pay bank presidents would be better paid to nurses. Bank presidents are pretty interchangeable. They're people with a love of money, and there's a lot of those people around. Nurses are very special people, and once you find a good nurse, they're impossible to replace. So better to pay nurses what they're really worth than to pay it to bank presidents who are, they watch my money, sometimes not so much with my interests at heart. Nurses always have someone else's interests at heart. So that's my plea to triple, quadruple, whatever the salaries of nurses. They're more than worth it. But we can hug because we're
We're vaccinated.
Yeah.
Double vaccinated.
So quadruple vaccinated.
Yeah.
On Friday the 13th, I thought I was having symptoms related to atrial fibrillation. My heart rate was elevated, I was suffering from shortness of breath, and I connected all that to an episode somehow involved with atrial fibrillation. But I thought probably a good idea to go to the emergency department at the Jewish General Hospital. So I was admitted to the emergency department where I had a warm greeting from everybody, which kind of surprised some of the people working there who didn't know me, wondering why was this guy getting all this attention. But it was a wonderful homecoming. In fact, the first doctor who saw me came into my room and said, as I was coming to see you, I was told by 3 different people that you were an exceptional person, that I had to give you the best possible care, and that you were super important. He paused and said, just who the hell are you? So I told him the story and said, I'm not that important. It's just that I know all these people. He got some tests done and came back the next day while my son was actually visiting me and said, I have some bad news. The diagnosis is liver cancer. Cancer was about the farthest thing from my mind. And no one really likes to hear that word come out of a doctor's mouth. But I'm pragmatic. That was his diagnosis. How has it changed my perspective on life? Frankly, not all that much, which is kind of odd. You'd think I'd be terror-struck, but I'm not. It's just something that happened. We're going to deal with it, and we'll see what the result is. I have a terrific support network outside the hospital. My brothers, I have two of the best brothers you could ask for. My son, they've been terrific. Maggie has been beyond terrific. It's just my girlfriend has been an excellent source of support. My first wife, my ex-wife, has been terrific. So I have all this support going on. It's really hard to get myself to worry. I follow doctor's orders. I don't go to Dr. Google. The nurses in triage hate Dr. Google. The worst thing you can do. Just as a word of advice to anybody who may have to go to an emergency department. When you go in, do not tell the nurse you looked it up on the web, okay? It's all wrong. People who look things up on the web take horse medicine to cure COVID. So even if you did it, don't say it. Your care will be much better, I guarantee it. So since I don't do any of these things, which will only scare myself, I sleep well at night. I don't worry too much. Obviously, there's some worry, but it's something I have to deal with, and I'm dealing with it. I don't really have a choice. The typewriters are antiques. I think you would need to be, have the muscles in your finger of Arnold Schwarzenegger to use these old manual things. I just like having them around because they symbolize writing. I write on a laptop. I write when I'm at home. I write on my dining room table because the dining room table has a direct view to the Lachine Canal. So when I look up, I'm looking at something very peaceful and pleasant to look at. My writing process is really quite simple. I need to know that I have a 2 or 3 hour block of time when I'm not going to be interrupted. And I make notes. For every writing project I embark on, I have a different notebook where, I put down plot points and character names and character backstories and things that I forgot to write about. So a note so I can go back and add them and things like that. And it's just open computer, bring up manuscript to whatever point I'm at, and write. I'm rarely bothered by writer's block. Well, rarely, I'd say never. I'm not 100% sure what that is. I have a friend who's a writer who says you never hear about plumber's block or, electrician's block. When I'm writing and I get to a point where I'm not sure which direction to take, my question is to myself, what happened next? In life, something always happens next unless everybody dies. And that is not good for a book, to have all the characters die in one fell swoop. So because something always happens next, the question gets me going in maybe a different than anticipated direction, maybe not. The great thing about working on a word processor as opposed to a typewriter, making corrections is dead easy. Going back and filling in a blank spot is dead easy. Because sometimes you get to a point in the book where you realized you've missed something, you didn't set a clue right, just something comes up. So you can fix it at that point, and then you go back and fix all the preconditions that lead up to that point. So I find that really easy to deal with. And as I said, I keep careful notes on things that I've missed so I can go back and fix it. The other place I write is in cafes. Writing is kind of a lonely occupation. When you see someone doing it, it looks very much like typing. So in cafes, there's always sort of ambient noise of coffee being made, people chatting, and so on. And I kind of like that. It gives me a sense of being in kind of a community, even though everybody's a stranger. And you never know when you're going to pick up a stray bit of conversation that'll be useful, or a description to a character that'll be useful. The other thing I do pretty consistently is I play blues. Either I'm listening on my headset, or when I'm at home, I'm listening on the sound system. And there's something about that that takes my mind away from everything except what I'm working on. And that's pretty much the process. The key thing to remember is, though, and this is critical, writing is essentially rewriting. I find it really easy to bang out a first draft. It's just not that hard. The trick comes when you start to rewrite and things have to pull together in a more holistic and consistent way. The way I feel about writing is that I can't not write. When I was working on my first novel, for some reason or another, I don't remember the reason, I had to make a business trip to Toronto where I managed to have lunch, I think, with one of my friends from Classics when I worked there. And she said, you know, every writer I know says the same thing. They get to the point where they can't not write, and it's addictive. So I got to that point, like all writers do, and it kind of, even though I'm writing about murders and mysteries and all these horrible things, I feel at peace when I'm doing it. It's usually, if not always, the best part of my day. I miss it when, for whatever reasons, I can't be doing it. So I think even if I wasn't publishing, I would still be writing. And in fact, there are times when a book has gone to the editor, we're waiting for the copy editor to get through with it. I haven't started a new book in the series, where I'll write other stuff just for the fun of it, just to be writing. Stuff that normally doesn't get finished because I go back to the book once I get it back from the publisher with either editorial comments or copy editor suggestions for corrections, and so on. So I guess that's my stability in life. That's what keeps me grounded, is if I'm not writing, knowing that I'm going to write, and if I am writing, because that's what I'm doing. To learn more about me and my work, frankly, I can't think that there's that much more to learn following this, but the best advice I can give you is to read my books. And I say that in the way any other writer would say it, because we leave some of ourselves in the books. The plots are made up, the characters are by and large made up, but it's our approach to the plot and the characters and so on that makes each and every one of our books unique. If you like mysteries, I unashamedly recommend starting with A Stab at Life, then reading Banking on Life, and reading the next one when it comes out next year. And I really can't emphasize this enough. If you want to learn about how individuals survived the Holocaust, read the two books that I worked on. One is called Wrestling with Life. The other is called The Making of a Family. If they're not in bookstores at this point, they're available on Amazon. My mysteries are available in bookstores, certainly at Paragraph Bookstore and others. I don't go from bookstore to bookstore to see where it is. This can be an ego boost, or if you don't find your book on the shelf, kind of a kick in the ego. So I don't do that. I'm your discerning group of people. I'm sure you'll have no trouble finding these books, and I hope you enjoy them. If you do enjoy them, I'd love to hear about it somehow. If you didn't, keep it to yourself. In closing, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to watch this episode of Authors in Conversation. It was my pleasure to meet with you, albeit not in person. I hope those days return, but it was my pleasure to meet with you online. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. So with that, I wish you well, stay safe, be healthy. Goodbye for now.
When the sun is bright or in the darkest night, we're all in this together. I've got many friends and you are one of them. We're all in this together. It will be okay. Ça va bien aller. I've got many songs to sing. Won't you sing them too? I'll see you again at the rainbow's end, in fair or stormy weather. For love is like a smile that says see you in a while. We're all in this together.